Normally when I talk with clients around fear, it's around how fear gets in the way of sustainable behaviour change or goal achievement. Right now though, fear is playing a part, but in a different way. And so I wanted to share just a few more strategies on with what you can do moving through this. We're challenged in a different way, probably 3 ways. And firstly, there is a growing energy of collective fear. So whether you're aware of it or not, when the news is on or people are talking about it or we're having language about anything that's happening, it is growing this collective fear because the amygdala, the alarm center in the brain, is activating as a fearful, dangerous reminder or alarm that this isn't what we want. And so we are in a state of this fear response or fight or flight or fright response. So we have to watch this growing collection of energy of fear. The second thing is there is greater fear right now for many people and probably for all of us around losing something that we identify with. And 2 of those main things, of course, at the moment would be our health and our finances. And so the brain does not like anything that is not status quo. It's very addicted to status quo. So we're in a constant fear response when those things that we've identified with as important to us are at risk. The third thing is we are in uncertainty, a fear of uncertainty. And what that does to the brain is put us in anticipatory anxiety. And what that means is it stops us being able to take action. So what happens is there's a part of the brain that the amygdala would start to respond to or to communicate with to start to take action. But when we're in this fear response and anxious anxiety, there is no messaging to the action centers of the brain to do something. So there's the anterior cingulate cortex, which will look at uncertainty, at errors, at conflicts. And right now, if both the amygdala and the ACC are filtering information that looks very fearful, then also included in that is the basal ganglia, and it can't actually send signals then to take action to the action centers of the brain. So in that state, we feel very, very helpless and hopeless, and that emotion damages our hope and possibility and really feeds fear. So uncertainty is a big one. So I wanted to share 3 ways, or 4 ways probably, that we can start to move through some of these things that are affecting us right now. The first one is being able to distance ourselves from this growing fear or collective fear that we're being exposed to. And by that, it's making a very, very conscious decision right now around what you will let into your brain and your mind. So that might mean choosing intentionally that you will check your news feed on your phone twice a day. It might mean that you refresh your social media once per day. It might mean that you will listen to the news, and being selective on which news you listen to, you might do that once a day. But this constant, even if it's background noise and refreshing the phone to see what's next, isn't helping this growing energy of collective fear. The other thing that we can do is really watching our language around when we're entering into that. So whether we like it or not, any conversations that are around having no control over this situation will drive that energy and fear. So really watching and distancing ourselves and being in control of what we're allowing to come in will help with that energy of collective fear. When we look at being at risk of losing something like our health and finances, and they're important areas of our life, sometimes if we're focusing all our attention onto the areas that aren't right, and this goes for any time of life, when we're focusing all our attention on there, we forget about and we can't find hope and possibility when we're not also bringing in and looking at and focusing our attention on the other areas of life that are really great for us right now. So what I'd encourage you to do is, there'll be a link below on the life fulfillment grid, is to sit and follow that process to look at all the most important areas in your life. And if health and finances are at risk, I would really encourage you every day, as many times as you can, to bring your focus and attention back onto the areas of life that are good, because we know that the brain, the amygdala, will look for emotion and process by emotion, and it will process fear first, but right behind that is hope and possibility. So if we can start to focus our attention on things that feel more in control, the brain and the stress response will reduce, and the amygdala activation will response, and that stress will reduce in that stress response. So really looking at identity diversification through that life fulfillment grid. The other thing I would encourage us to do around the uncertainty piece is to look at our values again. And again, I will put a link down there with some instructions from another program that I have, but you can access it for free to start that process and bring control back to your behaviours. We know that in uncertainty, it's the not choosing anything that is worse than making the wrong decision. We can always cope with the wrong decision, but when we're stuck in that helplessness and hopelessness, it puts us into that stress response. And so what we really want to do is bring action and choose, to be able to choose and get clarity on which action do I take, A or B right now in every single moment. So in uncertainty, we need to build on mindfulness processes and strategies in every moment, so then we can stop in that moment and choose the next choice and behaviour that we can take. Then what I would really encourage you to do is work on some areas that tame that limbic brain. And so I use a 4C's methodology when I work with anything around coaching, and the 4C's are clarity, one, so clarity of things like our values, who we are, what we stand for, what our big picture life looks like. And if we aren't clear on that, then right now feels even worse. Clarity, then it comes conviction. And when we can only get conviction in the direction we're moving when we tame that stress response. So all things like meditation, journaling, good nutrition, looking at other stress triggers that we can reduce. All of these things as actions can start to tame that amygdala so that we can find hope and possibility and move forward. The third piece of the 4C's is around around consistency. How do we pattern interrupt the autopilot of the brain that all of us will be in that stress response? So it could be using things like post-it notes to remind ourselves that we will get through this. It could be a phone alarm just to say breathe and check in, so that you can pattern interrupt autopilot and say, all right now, breathe, and then what is my best next step? Then you've got charge. That's the last element of it, where we really build in practices every day and keep ourselves accountable to them so that we can start to move forward on these changes that we make. So I will put some links below. These actions, although they seem really minimal, are important on reducing that stress response, if not for the feeling of life through all of this, because it's not going away in a hurry, at least for our body, our immunity, and the actual physical body, and supporting our body as best as we can. If you have any questions right now, I am, all my consultations are at 50% off. I would love to do it for free, but I have obligations too. But I am willing to do those at 50% off if you are stuck and not sure on how you move forward through this. It takes an outside looking in approach sometimes to understand what is happening and what is sitting right underneath that and driving it. I hope you find some benefit in the downloads below. Take care and be well.